I'm gonna show you how I made this image look like this. Let's do it. I originally got this image when I was traveling. So if you're ever out and traveling and stuff like that, I highly recommend you take photos of things that you think look interesting, because you can always kind of reuse them and repurpose them in some of your artwork. That method is generally called something like photobashing. We just take like pieces from different photos, put them together. A lot of artists do it. It's really cool. It's a really fun technique. The first thing I do is I'm gonna take this top dome portion, get around it, and then Control T, go to warp, and then grab these edges, these corners, and kind of like straighten it out. That's the image that I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this also for later, if we want to like photobash that into something, and then the rest of this can just get painted out. And I kind of like that it's overcast. Generally, when it's like in overcast weather, that is easier to work with for 3D and for digital paintings, because you don't have to worry about really dramatic lighting. That would be either like really hard to continue from a photo, or it would be just hard to replicate accurately. All right, so next thing we want to just start getting rid of is these people, and I probably will use content aware fill. Just let's see how that goes. I haven't really played with too much of content aware fill, especially with like the later versions of Photoshop. Yeah, I'm just used to doing it the old way. I don't know how to select. See, I don't know what to do. I don't want to watch a tutorial on how to use the, like, in the middle of my workflow. It's dumb. All right, I guess I'm just gonna do the old trusty paint out method. Like Photoshop, I understand they like adding new tools and like little things to help people, but every single time you add a new tool, it's like a new workflow that people have to learn. And you know what makes using certain art tools so fun and efficient is that you don't have to constantly be changing your workflow or be looking for different tools. So anyway, because this is a rough painting, I don't think it's super duper necessary for me to keep all the textures and information and everything like that. I feel really dumb for not figuring out the content aware thing, but I don't have time. Like, I'm sorry. I'm sure it's really simple, and I'm sure like somebody's mad at me right now, but I don't know. So let's select color balance, toning it down a bit like that. Like I wanted this like neon color palette. Might even grab like levels. I love taking levels. And so with Photobash, it's a lot more easier to Photobash other photos when the image is like really dark, or when it's like overcast, because there's not a lot of harsh shadows or lights, and it's a lot easier to blend stuff in that stage. So I think that looks good. It's a little dark, but that's perfect for me, because if we're gonna be putting like neon lights over top of it, they're really gonna pop. So I am gonna just quickly darken the sky up a bit. And this brush pack is like a god pack. I got it a long time ago. It's got everything, you know, smoke particles, all these kinds of things. If you do want to download them, I have them on my website, and I got permission from the original creator of the pack, who doesn't host them anymore, to distribute them. So it's free. It's not like you don't have to pay for nothing. So while I'm darkening the sky, I'm noticing that as I paint lightly, it's creating kind of like this fog, and I'm going to continue that to the top of the building, because I like the way that I have a smudge brush here. I'm just going to smudge out the edges to really blend them in a little bit more. Cool. So it's not exactly the same vibe, but it's I don't know, I like it. I still like it. It feels a little bit more mature to me, because I did make this image like a couple years ago, maybe even like more than 5 years ago. I wasn't really as confident with painting. I wasn't as confident with my compositions, with my coloring, all that kind of stuff. I just, you know, worked in a frenzy, because it was like I was freelancing. Let me just start dropping in some of these more notable areas. I think this shape will look really cool, because it'll be in the distant fog, and I can add like, I'm gonna do it really quick, but because it's in the fog, I can add like a loose kind of, you know, one of these, and then use the smudge tool to kind of blur it out and smudge it out. So it you know what I mean? It starts kind of looking like it's behind the haze. I don't know. I just like that effect. I think that looks cool. Oh, one thing I am gonna do is take back the original. I'm gonna duplicate it, turn everything back on, and then I'm just gonna extract really bright areas from it, like that. So really all I want is those orange lights. So what I can do with this is I can go into like a lighten or something and start getting some of that color back. But you can see it's kind of coming, it's on top of everything, so it's kind of coming through, which is nice. Because now they kind of are glowing, like they're on a lighten layer. And if I was to take this again and then blur it or something else, and it would really, really glow. It would really look like it's glowing. There is some separation here from the silhouette, like from the building silhouette, because I was noticing it was getting lost here. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of outline that. This guy is a character from the client, so I'm just gonna instead add our own like little figure. Just gonna loosely sketch something in. I think what I do when I make these reflections too is I'm just gonna show you quickly. I just take the portion that I want to have be reflected, duplicate it, flip it, and then like very loosely warp it around, and then I blur it, not before taking out a lot of the darks. I've noticed that like with reflections, the only thing that really reflects is the highlights, not really like the shadows and stuff, or like not really the dark areas. I don't know if I'm really figuring anything out there, but that's just what I've noticed. I'm sure there's like a science to it, or maybe I'm wrong, but what looks right to me is stuff like that. So now there's this, it looks super glossy, and we can turn it down a bit so it looks a little bit more less reflective, but that's essentially how I did that. So those cables actually came from this website. This website's called Photobash.org, and they have a ton of stuff, and they've really come a long way with what they offer. They're starting to offer like 3D models now, whereas before they really only offered photos. But they have this cable pack. They had this, and this is what I used for a lot of those cables that you see in this image. So I'm gonna grab some of these cables. Yeah, I don't know. There's something about cables and cyberpunk environments that the building that has all the cables going to it feel like the central building, feel like some kind of important building. And cables are also another cheap way to get the audience to look in a certain direction. So if you want to create all of these like visual angles to have the audience focus to a certain spot in your composition, cables are another great way to do that, because there's all this open space here, and I don't really have any way that feels fitting to the environment to fill that space and also make it a directional line. I mean, I can probably add like structures and stuff in the very immediate foreground, and I've done that before too, but I think these cables are actually a good way to do that still makes it fit into the world. Lock the layer, go in and just start like loosely throwing some gradient over it to make it feel like it's part of the environment. Yeah, so now your eye kind of gets drawn to that, and it's a little strong right now, but that's okay with me. I still want to create little moments for the audience or for the viewer to notice and to do a little bit of like world building inside their own head of like, what's that? I wonder if that's like what is this? What is this building doing? Is this building okay? Is it like damaged? All right, so it's starting to already get there. So we have our figure. I'm going to give them a bit of a rim light like this character has, and that'll just help separate them and pop them from the background. Top of the head, top of the shoulders, and that's really it. You don't need to do anything else. I might use some of the atmosphere color to fill in the shadows, the shadowy area. Just so there's like that highlight, that secondary light, and then shadows in between. I'm going to use the lasso tool to kind of mark out folds and close, like he's got his hands in his pockets or something. Yeah, who knows? Once you've drawn people and clothes enough, you can start to figure out, minimal enough to that you're not painting every single fold, but captures the shape enough that people will generally understand And now I'm gonna do some really fun effect that what you see here is where it gets blurry at the top and bottom, and then it's really sharp in the middle. You can kind of see this really interesting effect. That is blur gallery tilt shift. You can start moving these around. I learned this effect from this amazing artist who does these like really realistic renders of cars. I think he'd be doing this effect all the time, and I would never know how he's done it. One day he uploaded a video to YouTube and it was a speed video, so I had to go really slow and watch it. And at one point he uses this effect and it's like 10 frames. I had to slow down the video to really see how he got to this menu. And that's how you do it. So you can control the blur strength here, and you can get some really interesting effects if you go max out. But I usually stop it at where the edge of the ground is, and the top I bring down really up until I think it's like a good focal point. So we're losing a little bit of that there. I want to bring some of that back. Here is good. I think the blur is a little strong. And see here, the reflections, they change too. So they kind of get this bokeh effect. I like that. Oh, you know what? I forgot. We gotta get our boy back in there. There we go. So one thing I also learned, and I've done videos on this on socials about like how to give neon lights kind of like a brighter feeling. And that's to whatever the light source is. Let's say it's this bar. Take a brush, bring the opacity down to like 10, 15, and then select kind of almost random colors and just slowly wash that over the light. And this is an effect that I don't think I used in the original painting, but this is something that I learned later on and have since been using this effect. I'll leave a link in the description to videos where I kind of explain this effect in more detail or in other examples. I learned this technique from an artist by the name of John Liberto. I hope I'm saying his name right. He is, I don't know, one of the concept artists for Halo, like the Halo games. And he has some amazing artwork. And if you ever see his stuff, and I've talked about him in other YouTube videos, but he has like this amazing way of painting lights and signs and stuff that is still very painterly and very like bright. Now I'm putting a wash of purple. It's kind of noticeable, but it's still very light. And I think the idea from when I learned it from him, it was just like a Gumroad video. So like anyone has access to this stuff. It's not like I got a mentorship or anything like that. Trust me, I asked. Yeah, you just kind of essentially keep layering things like this, and then you go back in with a really bright kind of core. And I'm using I think this is by default with Photoshop, but if you click the numbers at the top of your keyboard, you'll see it'll switch the opacity level. So that's a really quick way to get to layer colors without switching opacity manually. So for example, if you click 1, it's 10%, 2, 20, depending on how fast you click the number after each other. So 1, 10%, 2, 20%, 3, 30%. But if we click 3, 4, it'll make it 34%. So if you want 11%, 1, 1, or if you want like 90%, 9, 0, 9, 9. I've never tried 100, yeah, 100. So you can just manually type the numbers in. I had other people asking me about how I change the brush size, and that's the brackets next to O and then P on the keyboard. Hitting the right bracket increases the size. Hitting the left bracket decreases the size. So I'm able to do everything from the keyboard. It's also why I never really use the buttons on like the Wacom tablet or the remotes and stuff that come with them. I'm so used to using shortcuts on the keyboard that I don't really need to do that. Let me add a couple more Photobash elements. It's a close-up of that same building. I'm gonna take this. Oh, this is cool. I think that looks kind of cool, and it's already kind of glowing, so we'll just kind of stick that above. So this is the fun part of photo bashing, is that you can just it's really limited to your own imagination. This brush is really good, so what you'll do is you'll kind of get a bright value and kind of gradient up like that, and then get the brush as an eraser. You just start like tapping around, changing the opacity, and then if I grab it and then warp it after that, I can get even more interesting effects and direction in the fog, or if it's smoke, or if you have like a blast or something, or some action movement. I've used this in the past before in some of my other images, and you'll see that. I like here how it's kind of like drawing your eye towards the character, so I'm going to keep that a little bit, and I'll use that effect again. I got a text message. Ah, it's telling me that don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. So I'm gonna throw this over top of everything. Like, so color dodge is good because the rain takes some of the color, which kind of happens in real life, but screen is a lot more like pure to the black and white nature of the image. So it really only takes out the black, and then all you have is white left. And if you kind of want that effect, like, we can maybe lower the opacity of it so it's a little bit there still. I'm gonna do a bit of a wash to start kind of blooming out the colors. And all right, cool. So I keep zooming out really far because if your image is readable from this far, like even this far, it's a quarter of an inch tall. But you can see there's something in the middle. There's like this horizon line implied here, and then there's some kind of dark figure in the foreground. So I always zoom out. I rarely work like this close unless I'm adding details, or unless I'm like adding details to a focal point. I rarely work that close. I'm usually here or further because you really want the image to read. I think if you zoom in too much, you'll start to lose the picture. So it's always good to zoom out, and it's always good to see like where your colors are popping. Is your eye being drawn to the point that you want your eye to draw? So like there's this blue line here pointing into this direction from the edge. There's these cables, pink triangles that are really catching my eye, and then there's this character in the foreground that's also catching my eye. So I do want you to look pretty much here, and everything else should be feeding into that space. If you always wondered how are some artists able to achieve a very painterly style, it's because they're not zooming in. So now that we have some of that water back in, I'm just going to start erasing it, because again, if we zoom all the way out, it is like noise, and it's starting to muddy, like we're losing some of the really dark tones where that figure is. So I'm just going to strategically and lightly kind of get it away from them. And sometimes you'll notice this in life, but if it's raining at night, the only place you really see the rain particles, where there's a light source. Okay, so I took these pictures when it was snowing outside, and so you can see that you really only see it around the light source, which makes sense because it's like illuminating all the particles. I just keep getting reminders that you guys need to subscribe. So like that's kind of, you want to keep that in mind when you're adding rain to night scenes. You only really want it to show up where there's a light source. It wouldn't make sense for bright rain to show up like in a dark environment. And so what you can do is just kind of lightly erase it where there isn't light and kind of keep it where there is, and that will give you a little bit more of a realistic effect with your light, with your rain. All right, so I think I'm pretty much done with this. I'm gonna adjust the levels a bit to darken the darks and lighten the lights. Pretty happy with this. And the last thing I'm gonna do is, so what I personally do to finalize my images at the end stages, is I always add a noise layer and a chromatic aberration layer. And I'm going to show you how I do both of those things. So with your final image here selected, everything, Control Shift Alt E, and it will merge everything and then duplicate that layer. Yep. Filter lens correction. So you go in here, and this is, it'll just add that kind of fringing at the end, at the edges of your image to, I don't know, it's like it's a lens effect, you know, it adds like a little bit of a cinematic kind of touch to your image. If you look at this one right here, it's just white. But if I make this 50, and then there's already that blue on the left, and then this -50, and then the red on the right. So it's like splitting. It's a lens effect that happens in real life in like photography and film, but when you recreate it in digital art, it gives it a little bit of that cinematic feel. So I think that's enough for me. You can also mess with the, like, you know, vignetting and stuff that you can get here. I think it's doing it here. So if I go negative, it'll make it darker, which, you know, this is a look. I think Cyberpunk like the game constantly has this vignette effect around it. So they do that for, you know, cinematic effects. So in my original image, I have a white vignette, but in this one, I want to make it a darker vignette because I think it kind of tunnels your vision away from the edges. That's what you want. You don't want the eye to be escaping the core of the image. And then we will add a noise layer. What I do is I select the marquee tool and I just make a big square over the whole thing. I right click, fill with gray, and then deselect it. Then if we zoom in, it's just gray. So go here, filter, noise, add noise. And if you want to get a live kind of representation of what's going on, I'm going to change this to overlay and 50%, which is, or 30%, which is usually what I set my noise layers at. So if we go to noise, add noise, you can start to see there's like this kind of grain against everything. What's good about noise is that if you're photo bashing specifically, you definitely want to use a noise layer at the end, because when you're photo bashing from different images and those images naturally have their own noise, if you're photo bashing and painting, it's gonna be a lot more obvious what's a photo and what's painted, because painting, like digital paint, doesn't have noise on it. It's very clean. And if you're combining, if you're trying to blend photos and digital painting, it's gonna be a little bit more jarring, and it's gonna be a little bit more obvious that that you photo bashed. Once you add a noise layer to the end, to the top of everything gets an even coating of noise, so then it becomes a little bit harder to distinguish when there's a photo end and when does the painting begin. And it's just something that I think also adds a cinematic element, cinematic effect to it. That chromatic aberration and that noise together really give it like a filmic quality. And you know, if you want to go even more filmic, you can add a I'm just gonna do it really rough here. I never get it perfect, but on top of the noise, you can just add these black cinematic bars. I don't know, sometimes this can add a little extra. It's another, God, you guys need to subscribe, man. I'm getting so many notifications about that. But yeah, I think this is the end of the image, and maybe I'll drop the PSD on like my Patreon or something. And right now, don't worry, the Patreon is free for anyone. You don't need to be subscribed to any tier. You can if you want to, but I'll probably drop this PSD on the yeah, I don't know, maybe not. Who knows? Maybe I will, maybe I won't. It really depends on if y'all care. But if you do care, leave a comment, you know, subscribe, all that stuff. I know I've been saying it a bunch. Like, dislike, whatever you feel like doing. Yeah, I hope to make more videos like this in the future. There's obviously so much knowledge, so much information to share, and I'm really excited to do that. I love like posting stuff online. Like, this is what inspired this video. I posted a little thing about how you can take photos of buildings and turn them into entire cyberpunk scenes, and everyone was asking how. So hopefully this video explained it. And yeah, I'll leave links to everything down in the description, like brushes, like, you know, inspirations and other artists you should check out that I learned from. And yeah, that's it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.